What's going on, Neon Nation? Welcome back to the Neon Arcade for some Night City Wire Episode 3 coverage. Before you guys ask, yes, full analysis videos for both the tour of Night City as well as the gang trailer will be analyzed with a fine-tooth comb, so look out for those starting next week. Before we do start off, however, I did launch my Cyberpunk 2077 focus website with some of the standout lore of the world as well as some of the news of the past week in the world of Cyberpunk. Look out for me to constantly update this site with everything and anything Cyberpunk, just like you'd see on this channel. If you're interested, there will be a link in the pinned comment and on screen, so check that one out. Now for the uninitiated, Night City Wire Episode 3 was streamed yesterday, showing off Cyberpunk 2077, featuring an expansive trailer taking you through never-before-seen locations and personalities in Night City, as well as a gangs trailer profiling the main gangs and how they operate. We also had the Cyber Up Your PC trailer where PC specs were released by CDPR, so for those of you stressing out about your rig, let's take a look at the minimum as well as recommended specs. First up in the minimum specs department, we have support for the 64-bit version of Windows 7 or Windows 10, although Windows 10 is recommended. The game will also utilize DX12. In terms of your CPU, you can get away with an i5 3570K or an AMD FX 8310 with 8GB of RAM, whereas the recommended settings for the game is the i7 4790 or Ryzen 3 3200G. Minimum GPU here is the GTX 780 with 3GB of VRAM or the Radeon RX 470, with the recommended GPUs being the 1060 with 6GB of VRAM or the Radeon R9 Fury. The minimum specs was created with 1080p low settings versus recommended, which is 1080p high. CDPR have also made mention that requirements for 4K and RTX may also be published in the future for those of you who want to max everything out. The size of the game was also revealed, coming in at 70GB, which is a tad smaller than what we were expecting based on some older information, pinning the game at an 80GB minimum. Now believe it or not, when The Witcher 3 first came out, it was only 35GB, so naturally it just seems that CDPR is very good at optimization. Next up, there was also a brand new world building site released called nightcity.love, which is filled with some of the best advertisements in the game alongside details on the political structure, history, and districts in the world. Now oddly enough, I launched the Neon Arcade website literally 5 minutes prior to the Wire episode, so CDPR, if you could stop copying me, that would be fantastic. In any case, I will tie many of these elements into my analysis videos since they are largely relevant, but for now we have 19 glorious new images of the city to show off. First, we have what appears to be the remnants of a sandstorm with some sun-drenched smoke channeling through the cracks illuminating this area. Not quite sure if these screenshots have ray tracing, but regardless, the lighting on some of these screens is quite impressive. There are a couple of screenshots showing a bustling street with a variety of cars and some pretty high traffic density underneath this illuminated bridge. The mega building in the back is reminiscent of the one from the Tools of Destruction trailer. Moving on, we have a shootout between gangsters out near Rancho Coronado, right outside the Petrochem dam. This location seems very similar to this one from the concept art. In our next screenshot, we have a massive and fairly populated traffic circle in what may be the middle of the corporate plaza. We've seen V drive in one of these underpasses in the RTX trailer, and to me this is one of the most impressive screenshots they've released thus far. A sunny street outside an NCART terminal is shown here with a monorail above, as well as a tourist terminal in the next shot. We won't be able to use the subway, but these tourist terminals will act as our fast travel beacons. There is also a maelstrom lair with a trauma team facility in the background in this shot, as well as what appears to be the effects of acid rain in Pacifica, with NPCs on the street sporting umbrellas to prevent getting drenched. As a reminder, inclement weather will be a big part of Night City. There are a few more absolutely stunning shots, and they are all so elaborate, and it's almost overly stimulating just to look at them. In action, the sensory overload is going to be cranked up a couple notches, so I'm sure this game will be quite the experience. Now we also had quest designer Patrick Mills jump onto a post-show Q&A to address some questions about Cyberpunk 2077, so let's go over some of the standout details there. Mills mentions that the trauma team shows up from time to time, and they're also referenced from time to time. Whether or not you can do any missions with them, he's not revealing. Now there is something like Gwent in the game, but they are not revealing it yet. This is a bit contradictory to what CDPR has said in the past, but maybe his answer was more in reference to the size of a particular minigame in 2077 being on par with Gwent and not an actual card game. Now Mills also reveals an insane fact that the elevators are actually not loading screens. There are only loading screens for fast travel, but outside that there are none. Moving on, fast travel is from data terms, which is a nice callback to the 2020 lore, and you can also fast travel from previously mentioned tourist terminals. Now according to Mills, CDPR have also revealed all the main romance options. They have appeared in all the content so far, so go back and see if you can spot anyone that we might have missed. To me it seems like Judy, the Nomad Girl, Misty, Meredith Stout, and Jackie are potential love interests, which means there is a serious lack of male characters. Moving on, we have an interview with Mateusz Tomaszkiewicz, who was interviewed by online publication The Gamer, where he gave out a couple new details. When it comes to being sensitive when depicting Haitian gangs like the Voodoo Boys and Mexican gangs like the Valentinos, Mateusz mentions that they did have consultants on this, and there were also discussions in the studio, which is multicultural by nature. Their localization partners also helped with consulting on decisions, and they tried to get as many opinions as possible. In a question about how Cyberpunk depicts sex work and the Mox gang, Mateusz brings up the concept of dollhouses, which you have yet to hear about. These are home to dolls, who are sex workers who have specific cyberware just for their specific clientele. People can live out their wildest fantasies with dolls, and after the job is done, their cyberware allows for them to forget their last encounter. It is an interesting and morally grey concept that I hope is explored more in some of the side content in the game. When it comes to sexual augmentations, Mateusz also mentions the Mr. Stud and Midnight Lady implant, which are penis and vagina replacement upgrades. Next up we have Lana Pierce, former IGN employee, now YouTuber, being showcased as a side character that will be exclusive to the Nomad life path. Add another influencer to the tally, and I think that out of the ones we've seen so far, she definitely has the coolest design. Finally, we have the release of the Pure Arts Johnny Silverhand statue, which will retail at a whopping $899 US. CDPR has also released a limited edition Voodoo Boys poster, so check that out if you're interested. Before we round this one off, remember check out the latest website for additional content. Subscribe if you enjoyed this one, and for my analysis of both trailers, check back into the channel early next week.